where we read this, "At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hira." Straight out the blocks, Judah makes a bad start in this chapter because he's turning his back on his brothers. And that's bad news, not just because they are family, but of course they are also the ones who are to inherit the promises of God. Those amazing promises he made to Abraham, saying, "I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you, and actually I will use you as my agent of blessing to the world." Amazing, rich promises for that family to be a part of. And yet Judah doesn't seem bothered about it at all. And so he leaves the company of this covenant community and he takes up residence in this Canaanite city. And what does he do when he gets there? Verse 2. "There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua, and he married her." Met and married are literally saw and took. And if you have been with us or if you remember Genesis, you might know that when someone sees and takes in Genesis, well, it's not good news. Whether it's Eve seeing and taking the fruit back in the garden in chapter 3, or Pharaoh's officials seeing and taking Sarah, Abraham's wife, into Pharaoh's palace in chapter 12, or Shechem seeing and taking Dinah in chapter 34. That seeing and that taking, it always conveys bad news. It's a sure sign that someone is lusting over something or someone when they shouldn't. And sure enough, as verse 2 goes on, then Judah saw the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married, took her, and made love to her. You may notice that she's not named. And let's see what else we learn about this nameless woman. She becomes pregnant, she gives birth, and she names 3 sons. That's all we know of her. We don't know anything else about her and Judah's relationship. All we see of their marriage is Judah's sexual satisfaction and Judah securing his lineage with the birth of these sons. It's all Judah's interested in. And he has these sons, but actually he's far from a good father. In fact, he's dreadful. We're told that 2 of his sons are put to death by the Lord for doing what is wicked in the Lord's sight. And we don't get told what the firstborn son and Tamar's first husband does wrong. But we are told about Onan. Have a look down at verse 8. Then Judah said to Onan, "Sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother." Now, let me just pause there, because that's a pretty strange idea, isn't it? What is going on here? What is Judah asking Onan to do? Well, in the ancient Near East, for better or worse, inheritance got passed down the male side of the family. And so if a woman was widowed without a son, there was no one to take care of her, and therefore she was doomed to being destitute. But among God's people, there was a provision for this situation. A male relative would marry the widowed woman, and their first son would inherit the dead husband's estate and therefore would be able to provide for the mother. And then any further sons would sort of inherit from the brother, from the second husband. And sometimes this worked wonderfully. If you were with us before Christmas when we were looking at the story of Ruth, you might remember that beautiful example with Boaz being the kinsman redeemer for Ruth, taking her in marriage, caring for the family. It was a beautiful example. But here in Genesis 38, we have an ugly failure. Verse 9, but Onan knew that the child would not be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to avoid providing offspring for his brother. You see, Onan knew that as things stood, with his elder brother Er having no descendants, that he was due to get a bumper inheritance. Not only would he get his portion, he'd get his older brother's portion as well. But if there's a child to inherit Er's lot, well, then he loses out. And so he ensures that Tamar doesn't get pregnant. He still has sex with her, of course, because he's a man after his father's heart. What's he doing? Exactly the same, isn't it? He's putting his own sexual satisfaction and his own future lineage before anything else. Judah is a hopeless father, and he's a dreadful father-in-law. Because after Onan's death, he should have cared for vulnerable Tamar. He should, as we see, have given his son Shelah to her. But until he was able to do that, he should have brought this vulnerable woman into his home to honour her, to care for her, to provide for her. But what does he do? Verse 11, Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up. For he thought, well, he might die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's household. You see what Judah does? He callously shifts the blame onto Tamar, because his boys couldn't have done anything wrong, could they? And then he sends her away. Tamar goes and she lives in her father's household for long enough that, as we're told in verse 14, it's clear that Judah is not going to give Shelah to her as he'd promised to do, pouring more and more disappointment, more and more disgrace upon Tamar. It's desperate, isn't it? It's desperate how Judah and his family have let Tamar down again and again and again and again. And yet, despite all that, it seems that from living with them, she managed to learn enough from them about the Lord their God. That while they, his people, might not be loving, while they, his people, might have abysmal characters, while they, his people, might break their promises, well, actually, he is loving, and his character is caring, and his nature is promise-keeping. And she's heard enough about the Lord, and maybe in her father's household, she's seen how bad the Canaanite gods are. She's seen enough of the Lord that she knows she wants to be one of his people. She doesn't want to be part of her father's Canaanite household. She wants to be part of Judah's Israelite one. Now, sadly, she knows that her father-in-law doesn't care about restoring her. No, he only cares about one or two things. his sexual satisfaction, his securing his lineage. So she leaves her father's household to do what she has to do, willing to embrace further disgrace to secure her place among God's people. Let's see what happens. Verse 13. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had now grown up, that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. And when Judah saw her, verse 15, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your seal and its cord, and the staff in your hand," she answered. Now, we don't carry around seals and cords and staff, so we're not quite sure what's going on here, but this is the ancient equivalent of Judah's thumbprint for his phone. And that with this seal and this staff, she could do anything in Judah's name. She's got access to everything. And you sort of think, Judah, it would be foolish to give up those things in any situation, not least one that you know you shouldn't be in. But Judah's impulsive desires get the better of him, and so we read at the end of verse 18 that he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. And so verse 19, after she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again, mourning in more ways than one, even though her plan has come off. Judah heads home, and then when he gets home, he tries to pay his debt to this prostitute that he met, whoever she may be, because, well, he clearly cares more about keeping his obligation to her than he does about keeping his obligation to his daughter-in-law. But this friend, Hirah, can't find her, and so rather than ask any more questions, Judah decides to write off the seal and the staff in a bid to save face. Rather than say, "Has anyone seen a prostitute with my seal and my staff?" After all, I'm sure he can come up with some lie to cover up his tracks. Wouldn't be the first time Judah had done something like that, would it? And then he gets another chance to do something he's done before. He gets another chance to dishonor Tamar, because here comes a report about her. Verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Indignant. What did Judah say? "Bring her out and let her be burned to death, because while I don't care for her, I'm going to claim authority over her." Verse 25, as she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said. And she added, "See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." I imagine when that message was given to Judah, you could have heard a pin drop. Perhaps the only noise would be a few of his attendants whispering questions to one another, wondering what on earth he was going to do. And then verse 26, a contrite voice speaks. She is more righteous than I. It might be better translated, she is righteous, not I. Since I wouldn't give to her my son, Shelah. Such a tragic tale, isn't it? So desperate. You might be thinking of another reason, why is this in our Bible? What on earth can we take from Genesis 38? What possibly can it teach us? Well, in the order of service, I've put two things at the bottom of that notes page. Three things we can take from this dark, dark story. Here's the first one. Jesus' bright light, it shines against Judah's dark treatment of Tamar. Let's remind ourselves, what did Judah do? He brought Tamar into his family, which isn't necessarily a bad thing to do. Only once that she was there, he treated her dreadfully. He ended up blaming her for all the things that he and his sons were culpable of, before he threw her out when she was at her most vulnerable, only to top it all off by taking advantage of her. It's pretty dark, isn't it? And here's what I want you to know. I want you to know that Jesus, in whose name we meet today, is nothing like that. You see, when Jesus brings you into his family, and that is unquestionably a good thing, when Jesus brings you into his family, you are there for keeps. He will never cast you out. Jesus will never shift the blame onto you. In fact, what does he do? He bears the consequences of all that we're culpable of. In those moments when you're vulnerable, he's not going to let you go. He's going to hold you fast. And he will never take advantage of you. Rather, he has come to give you life, and life to the full. I don't know everyone's stories. It may be that some of you are here this morning, and actually, like Tamar, you have been treated appallingly by God's people. And yet also like Tamar, you've seen something attractive about their God. That despite their dreadful behaviour, you've had a glimpse somehow of his love, his character, his promise-keeping ways. If that's you, please know that their mistreatment of you is wrong. That, as with Judah's sons, it's wicked in the Lord's sight. But know also that in Christ he moves towards you. That in Christ he wants to bring healing for your hurt. You see, Jesus' light, it shines bright against Judah's dark life. That's the first thing we can take from this chapter. Here's the second. It's only hinted at here, but it gets developed over the remaining chapters of Genesis. It's that nobody is beyond God's redemption. Even someone like Judah can be redeemed by God. Because when you recognize that there is a one who is righteous when you are not, and when you see that actually there's one who you have rejected and one you've wronged, and yet wants to be family with you, when you recognize those things, then the possibility of change is open to you. Let me show you where that hint of change in Judah's life appears. It comes at the end of verse 26, after his confession, where we read this. He did not sleep with her again. Now, I know, it's only small. But for someone as carnal as Judah, it's a start. And in fact, later on in Genesis, we see this change working its way through his whole character. We find him advocating for his brothers rather than running away from them as he did at the start of this chapter. We find him, remember last week, if you were with us, he was the one who said, let's sell Joseph into slavery. Well, later on, he gives himself to be a slave so that his brothers can go free. There's all sorts of ways we see by the end of Genesis that Judah is a changed man. That nobody is beyond God's redemption. Now, for Judah, it started when God confronted him with Tamar. For us, God can start to bring this sort of change in our lives when we're confronted by Jesus Christ. When we confess that he is righteous and we are not. When we accept that though we have wronged him, though we've rejected him, he wants to be family with us. Again, it may be there are some here this morning who actually you've done what is wicked in the Lord's sight. It may be that, like Judah, you've been sexually promiscuous. It may be, if you're honest, that actually you're a million miles away from being the parent that your children need you to be. It may be you've mistreated those vulnerable people that you should have cared for. Maybe you'll do anything to save face, to preserve your reputation. Perhaps you're a massive hypocrite who calls others out for things that you do. If those things are weighing heavily upon you, if you feel caught out, as it were, like Judah, know that no one is beyond God's redemption. That your past doesn't have to be your future. That the verdict that came upon Judah's sons need not be the verdict that comes upon you. Nobody is beyond God's redemption, and then no situation is beyond God's redemption. It's devastating what happens to Tamar, isn't it? Imagine having not one, but two husbands that are so wicked that the Lord puts them to death. Imagine being kicked out of your family when you're at your most vulnerable. Imagine having to prostitute yourself to your father-in-law to find your way back in. You think surely nothing good can come from a situation like that. And yet, remarkably, in God's hand, something amazing happens. Because not only does Tamar find a place back in the family of Israel, she also finds herself in the family line of the Messiah. You see, she's there in the genealogy of Jesus, taking her place along with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, alongside David and Josiah and Zerubbabel, alongside the greats, if you like, of Israel's history, is Tamar. Without God redeeming Tamar's dreadful situation, without him, I guess, honouring her bold action, there's no Jesus. No situation is beyond redemption for our God. He did it in the life of Tamar, and of course he did it most fully in the death of her great descendant, Jesus. He's redeemed dreadful situations in the past, and he redeems dreadful situations today. He can even do it for people like me and you. Jesus' light shines bright against Judah's dark life. Nobody is beyond God's redemption. No situation is beyond God's redemption. And those three things means it's actually really good news that we have Genesis 38 in our Bible. So let me give you just a moment to reflect upon its teaching, and then I'll lead us in a prayer.